I know you're listening. You're here because something isn't right. Something feels twisted, upside down. Things don't add up. Hello, human. Welcome to our twisted universe. In this episode, we'll be discussing the Tower of Babel and its connections with other civilizations throughout history, with our special guest, Bob from Exit the Matrix. Also joining us will be Allie Gilbert from Down the Rabbit Hole podcast. After the show, amplify your energy with Vogel Crystals from AsariCrystals.com.
Hi, and welcome to our Twisted Universe. Today we're going to be talking with Bob from Exit the Matrix on Facebook and Allie Gilbert. She has a podcast called Down the Rabbit Hole, and we're going to be discussing the Tower of Babel. Hi, guys.
How's it going?
Good. So today we're going to geek out on the Tower of Babel. I know Bob's going to come up with some really interesting tidbits and kind of enlighten us on some interesting details. Bob, you want to kind of just jump in there?
Yeah, definitely. One of the greatest stories that's told, in humankind is, of course, the biblical Tower of Babel. And the thing is, though, about the Tower of Babel is it's not quite what most people are, maybe taught in Sunday school, or they may not get the full story just from reading the account in the Bible. And it is referenced in different parts of the Bible, mostly Genesis. But it's a pretty fascinating story, and it can have some major implications in our future also.
I was kind of getting lost on exactly why it was destroyed and why they built it and what the purpose was. It does feel like there's a part of the story missing. I don't know if you've dug deeper.
Oh yeah, so the basic biblical version of the story is that there was this King Nimrod, and he was actually a great grandson of Noah, through the line of sorry, I've got my notes here so I don't Cush. So basically the biblical story says that he was building this tower. He wanted to build it up to heaven, basically to give him access to heaven, to basically take God out so that he could become God. And because of that, the biblical God, Yahweh, came down and he destroyed the Tower of Babel. And at that time, everybody, all the humans on earth, they spoke the same language. And so he scattered all the peoples of the earth at, different parts of the earth, separated clans and everything. And basically, separated the languages of humankind, and it fractured it so that people came up with their own languages all over the world. And the idea was to keep humankind from kind of banding together and kind of almost coming together like a hive mind where everybody spoke the same language and everybody had the same aim. Because according to God, that was a dangerous thing, that humankind would have the ability, to even, I guess, even to challenge God. So I guess in a roundabout way, that's basically what the Old Testament version states.
That seems really, I mean, I know that's the story too, and it just seems really strange. Like God wants to divide us and not create unity. Is that to help us grow or to challenge us or stop us from being aggressive or ego driven? It seems strange.
So, there's a lot of holes in the story. And, as you guys know, I researched a lot of the Sumerian tablets, the Akkadian, a lot of those, the Babylonian accounts. And so they're on those tablets. There's a lot of um, you know, parts that they basically have the same story, just like Noah's flood and a lot of the other biblical accounts, like the Garden of Eden and all that. But the tablets, they fill in a lot of those holes and actually elaborate on the story quite a bit. From what just that basic teaching you get from the biblical narrative. So, um, but basically, some that a lot of people overlook in that account is the fact that there was like basically a one world government at that time, and Nimrod was the king that ran that, that oversaw that kingdom, and it makes a lot of sense when you start thinking back to the pyramids all over the earth. We're talking megalithic structures here. You had the ziggurats all over Mesopotamia. You had the pyramids in Egypt. You had the pyramids in South America and Latin America. You had pyramids in the Far East, in Asia. And so at that time, a lot of people, don't really put that together, just that simple understanding of like, well, isn't it kind of odd that all these pyramids were being built, thousands of years ago all around the world? It's almost as if there was a blueprint. Well, back then there was a world civilization, and there was that passing of information all around the world. And of course the knowledge of building and science and math and all of those things. But at that time, Mesopotamia was kind of like the the home base, I guess you could say. It was kind of the capital of the world. And of course, we'll go a little more into it later, but the Anunnaki or the Anuna gods, they were tied in with that. And Nimrod himself was not fully human too.
So the great grandson of Noah was not fully human. Was he
Nope.
part of like a fallen angel, or what was he?
So you can actually go back to Noah if you've ever read the Book of Enoch. It's interesting because the account of Noah's father, when Noah's born, he's surprised because he has these like bright shining eyes. He has like bright hair. He has this like aura around him, and his father is like scared because he thinks he's one of the angels, basically one of the shining ones that they called them, or the Watchers. And so it's interesting because when you actually read some of the Sumerian tablets, Noah's name in the Sumerian tablets, he goes by actually a couple different names. It's Atrahasis, Ziasudra, and the other one I have trouble saying. It's like I'm not gonna try it. But anyways, um, that in that account, the Anunnaki god Enki, who we've spoken about before, one of the rival brothers, who's also, his name was Ea, with the earth was named after him. He was actually the one who gave Noah the instructions on building the ark. And there's an interesting story where apparently he actually slept with Noah's mom. So Noah was actually part Anunnaki, at least according to the Sumerian tablets. In the Bible, that's not mentioned at all. It's actually the opposite in the Bible. It says that Noah and his family were the only pure bloodline, that, and that's why they were saved by God, was to carry on that pure bloodline, through the flood. So it's kind of interesting how you have totally different accounts in these ancient stories. But going forward with that, Nimrod's father was from the line of Noah, but his mother was actually Semiramis, and that's where you kind of get that Anunnaki bloodline, is through her. Um, so she's actually connected to the god Tammuz, or Dumuzi. Demuzid. So those were some different names. It depends on if you're looking at Akkadian, Sumerian, Babylonian, Assyrian. They have different names for these deities, but that was one of the Anuna gods that was, worshipped at that time by the Babylonians and those ancient cultures. And so that's where he gets his Anuna bloodline, or you could call it the fallen angel or the Watcher bloodline. There's, these beings, they go by different names, but they're, the same basic entities. And so he was actually described as this, major, like in the Bible, in fact, they say how great of a hunter he was. He was like one of the greatest hunters on earth. He was this man of renown, the old men of renown, like in the Bible, it says a lot of times. Just like Gilgamesh was a partial angel, partial human. And so he had a big stature, a lot bigger than your normal human, like taller, stronger, smarter, because he had extra abilities over your normal human being. So um, hope I elaborated on that enough.
You know what I find interesting, when you brought up the pyramids and kind of associated with like the one world government, that's kind of how it's like in today too, right? Like with the dollar bill. So it's just kind of like that replay subconsciously or consciously of, the pyramid associated with a one world government that I never knew about until I mean, I knew about it modern terms, but not being associated with, ancient times. So yeah,
Yeah.
I just think that's interesting.
Yeah, and I mean,
Yeah.
there's a lot of theories, definitely what the modern day archaeologists claim, they still are sticking to their tombs of the gods, of the Egyptian gods and these other gods, but that they were actually, I don't know, some kind of like power portals that connected ley lines throughout the earth. And I don't know if that's how they, at those times, if they used that power that was generated by the pyramids all around the world, if they were able to like kind of maybe telepathically, maybe that was a way almost like we have Wi-Fi calling and all that now, and your 5G and all that, your cellular.
They were
Yeah.
hypersonic tube train stations.
So
Yeah.
we talked earlier, and you had mentioned that when they went into Iraq, they were looking for like a gateway portal, but the Tower of Babel was also in Iraq, correct?
It was in Lower Mesopotamia, but yes, Iraq. Yep, definitely. Yeah, yeah, Shinar. It was right in that area where Uruk and Ur and all those first cities, Nippur, all those very first cities that were established by humankind with the help of the Anuna gods, the Watchers. They helped them. They taught humans how to build civilization, and they helped establish those cities. But if you go back even further than that, they had already established their own cities on Earth. You know, I mean, we're going back hundreds of thousands of years. So our history on Earth is way, way more. Um, it goes way further back, and there was way more advancement in the far past than what we're told nowadays. That, oh, it was hunter gatherers at that time, and they couldn't. I mean, but yet we have all these megalithic structures that were built in those time periods that even nowadays, even with our modern equipment and tools, we would be very hard pressed to try to, you know, build the pyramids and like Great Pyramid and even these pyramids and that the Mayans built and these megalithic structures in Peru. We don't even really have the technology to do that. I mean, if you look at Baalbek, you're talking about in Lebanon, you're talking about blocks that weigh thousands of tons. We don't have cranes that can move stuff like that. And they try to tell us like, oh, that was just slaves, rolling them on logs with hemp rope, and it's pretty insane actually when you think about the modern day theories on all of that.
I think it might have been one of your posts talking about the Great Pyramid, how many stones are in there, and that it's considered agreed that it was built in 20 years, and they'd have to lay one of those thousands of ton stones every 5 minutes in order to accomplish that, working around the clock for 20
Oh
years.
yeah.
And so yeah, it's not likely. We couldn't do that with modern equipment.
I mean, and I don't know how much you guys have read into like Atlantis and maybe Mu and some of those other, you know, ancient, human civilizations, or at least, we assume they were human, maybe a different type of hybrid human at the time. But I mean, if you read the Emerald Tablets of Thoth, um, he actually talks about how he was a priest in Atlantis, and when Atlantis was destroyed, he took off in one of his spaceships and he landed in what at the time Egypt was called Kemet, and he landed there, and he taught the people in northern Africa how to build pyramids and all that, and that was he was an Atlantean, and he had some Atlantean survivors that helped him, and, so I mean, whether you're looking at the Anunnaki version or Atlantis, I mean, to me those are more plausible than the modern day. They were tombs of pharaohs, and they were built by slaves, and I mean, I don't think people realize until you actually see from ground level how big these pyramids truly are.
Yeah.
The fact that they were dragging these, you know, rocks that weigh tons, I mean, hundreds of tons up inclines, hundreds of yards up in the air. It's just insane, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, it seems like the Atlantis technology, I was talking to one of our friends. She was on our show earlier, Ameribeth, and she's kind of had a memory of a past life or another life in another dimension, and she felt like she was living in Atlantis and had a real understanding of their technology and their community and everything she described. It was like almost like utopian. Like they lived in a community driven, earth based kind of environment with technology, but it wasn't corrupted until later on. And when the evil doers came in, that's when the civilization, it fell. But for a really long time, they lived in peace and harmony. And I wonder if they took that technology. When you're saying slaves, it seems like it would go against everything that we were told about Atlantis, because that wouldn't be somebody driving community and harmony and that kind of mentality to then turn and use slaves for labor and moving things. It seems like it couldn't be. So
Yeah.
I'm wondering if you're an advanced technology and you're higher spiritual, how could you have slaves? That's what I'm trying to say. How can that be? How can you abuse humans and be enlightened at the same time?
And if you have all that technology, why would you need slaves? You have the tools to do it simply. You wouldn't need to slave anyone.
Well, it's interesting you guys mentioned that that lady had a, past life in Atlantis, because when I was young, when I was in high school, I read a lot of Edgar Casey, and Edgar Casey had a lot of his readings, because he would do past life readings on people. Have you guys heard of Edgar Casey?
Mm-hmm.
I've heard of him. I've never read anything.
Yeah, he was called the Sleeping Prophet. He actually he lived nearby here in South Carolina on Myrtle Beach, and he was well known for, originally what he would do is he would go into these trances, and while he was in these trances, he would prescribe people. He could diagnose people like spiritually and see what was wrong with them, like if they had some, like, maybe cancer, or if they had, some wrong with one of their their glands or an organ or who knows, muscles or whatever. And he would prescribe them, things that would, help them with that. And he was very famous for that. Like people would travel from all around the world to see him. And this was back, in the like 50s and 60s and stuff. And well, a lot of times he would do these readings on people too when he was in his trances. And a lot of them would end up being past life, what they call it, past life regressions, or um, but kind of like similar to, I guess, what Dolores Cannon does too. But a lot of people he would have these readings on, they would talk about living in Atlantis, and they would describe all of these like technologies and what the civilization was like, very detailed. And there was, I guess, there was two factions. There was like the Brothers of Light, the Brothers of Darkness, and they had like they used crystals was a way that they focused power and energy, and that they powered their civilization with crystals, and they could communicate telepathically with crystals, and you know, and which is interesting because if you think about it in our modern day, in your cell phone and your computers and all that, you actually have crystals in there that they use silicone, crystals, in fact, that is used a lot of times because it holds a lot of data,
Yeah.
and so anyways,
They're programmable.
yeah, yeah, so yeah, which is super interesting. But yeah, so it was kind of interesting you mentioned that. But I had actually had a whole book that was all of Edgar Casing's readings on Atlantis, and it was all like compiled into one book. So I might have to pull that out again sometime and read it. It's been quite a while, but pretty interesting.
Well, along the lines of crystals and communications, I don't know if anybody remembers the old crystal radios. Didn't need an electrical source to run, but you could listen to AM radio on them.
Oh wow!
Yeah, it's
Wow.
just a crystal and a coil, and then an antenna, and then you'd plug in a headset, and you could hear the radio station playing clear like a transistor radio.
Wow. You
That's
Sorry, I
some.
don't I don't want to go off on a tangent, but an interesting thing. We used to live in Colorado, and the Stanley Hotel. Have you ever heard of that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's in The Shining. Or The Shining. Stephen King based The Shining off that. Well, it's sitting on a huge like where that hotel was built. It's got like tons of what is that? That large crystal type rock.
The quartz.
Quartz, yes. It's on a huge quartz outcropping, and it's interesting because of all the like the ghost sightings there and paranormal activity. And somebody actually had come up with that theory, and that it, because a lot of the sightings there, it's like it was recordings of the past. You would like see somebody walking down the hallway that was like dressed in the early 1900s, because that hotel was over 100 years old.
Which makes you wonder, is that actually a spirit, or are you looking into a replay of the past?
Yeah, it's sitting on top of a giant memory bank, and it just records the happenings around it.
Exactly.
Interesting.
I believe. Go ahead, Ellie.
Oh, well, I wanted to say with Edgar Casey, I was listening to something recently, and he was saying that there was something like very special about Myrtle Beach, and I don't remember the details about that. I don't know if it was associated with Atlantis or if that was like what he deemed to be the original Atlantis, but I just listened to it just like maybe a week ago, and I unfortunately don't know the exact details, but I did kind of gather that part. So are you familiar with that, Bob, at all? The
I'm
significance of
sure it
Myrtle
was
Beach?
mentioned. Yeah, it was probably mentioned in his book. I don't remember that particularly. I know that he loved living there, and that was like
Mhm.
where he was going to spend the rest of his days. He always talked about. But you're probably right. There probably was some kind of ley line running through there, or some kind of energy grid near there that he was probably tapping into. So I wouldn't be surprised.
kind of like the Stanley Hotel. So we'll put it back on that cycle. I didn't mean to take it away because you guys were on a cool trip on the Stanley Hotel. So,
I
Oh
just,
no,
but it's the
it
same
was
principle, right?
isn't it funny that they always call us like, foil hat wearers and conspiracy theorists and all that weird stuff. When we talk about crystals and ley lines, but they build the structures on them.
yes, yes.
Gee, I wonder why.
Well, you guys have heard about the 33-degree parallel, right? With our, latitude. So this ties in actually with the Anunnaki, the fallen angels. Mount Hermon was in the book of Enoch. It said that the angels came down on when they came to Earth. When they kind of went against the prime directive or against God, they came down and they landed on Mount Hermon. Well, Mount Hermon's on the 33-degree parallel, definitely. So you guys want me to kind of tie in the Anunnaki into this whole story now, back to the Tower of Babel?
Yeah, I heard there was something about tablets and Enki
So
and Lil.
yeah. First off, this is kind of interesting. I found out I was doing some research today, and so as we know, Babel in the Hebrew, at least in the Bible, they said it means confusion. That's where where God confused the languages of humankind, and spread out, kind of broke up that single language, that everybody spoke it back then. Well, in Akkadian, Babel or Babel, there's different ways you say it, actually means the gate of the god or gate of the gods. So it's kind of interesting. It's quite a bit different from the biblical meaning of it. And as far as the Anunnaki, the Anuna, the Watchers, I mean, honestly, they're all the same beings. You know, um, that was actually the chief city of Marduk. Well, Marduk was the son of Enki. He was also the Egyptian god Ra,
Oh.
and so Marduk was the chief deity of that city, and in the Bible he's actually mentioned, but his name's Merodach in the Bible. But he was there was a lot of people theorize that Nimrod was connected with Marduk some way or another, but at the very least he worshipped Marduk, and that was the chief god of that city. And it's interesting, remember I've talked to you guys about how you have the two brothers that are the rivalry, Enlil and Enki. So Marduk is Enki's son, his eldest son, and Enlil is, at least in the Tower of Babel, Enlil plays the character of Yahweh destroying the Tower of Babel. Well, he actually had his son Ninurta carry out the attack, and all these gods are in the Sumerian tablets talking about this. So which is interesting. The Bible always tries to talk like it's about one God. You got Yahweh, and that's he's the only God. He's a jealous God. There is no other gods but him. But it's funny because in the Old Testament, it's actually many times that God is actually Enlil or Enki. It's almost like the Hebrews, they took those two gods and they kind of meshed it into one single God. But all throughout the Old Testament, you can break it down where these two gods and their families are warring back and forth with each other. I mean, but so Marduk, I mean, that was one of the chief reasons why, so I'll go a little further into that story so you guys would understand why Enlil had his eldest son Ninurta, basically wipe out the Tower of Babel. Well, according to the book of Enki and to some of the Sumerian tablets, that what the Tower of Babel actually was it was like a sort of spaceport, because the Anunnaki, they were extraterrestrial beings, they were these gods, that the Watchers, that they You know, and there's a lot of, I go back and forth whether they're extraterrestrial from outer space or whether they're interdimensional beings, which I tend to actually think they're more or less interdimensional beings. But whatever the case is, the Tower of Babel was actually this device, this building. It had a reason. It wasn't just a, you know, it was kind of like saying it was a tower being built to reach God was kind of like a primitive way of trying to explain that it was, you know, a sort of spaceport or a Stargate. And
That makes
that
sense.
was what enraged Enlil, you know, was that here, you know, his
It makes more
his
sense.
brothers, yeah, Marduk was building this, you know, this Stargate or spaceport, and that was the true threat to this god.
Yeah, I
Wow.
could see that.
Yeah,
And then
Mind blown.
what you were saying, the Akkadian definition of Babel is a gate to
gate
the,
of God.
yeah,
Yeah,
gate
we're
to
gate
God.
of God.
And it all
Yeah.
kind of makes sense. They were trying to build a Stargate to maybe to launch an attack, or who knows. That's a long
Yeah,
time.
or to be able to, you know, because if you think about human beings, you know, when what the Anunnaki were doing, you know, we've got, you know, we've talked about this in the past, you know, where they were to give these human avatars, you know, the essence of life, you know, they had to infuse them with souls or spirit. And so they were pulling, you know, spirits, souls. You know, I know people kind of argue over the semantics of it, but we'll just call it spirits. They were pulling spirits in from, you know, from outside of this construct, this world, and they were infusing them into these avatar bodies, and that was what gave, you know, Adam and Eve life. You know that, you know, that's what you know, that's how you brought life into these, you know, these beings. You can't just create like clone bodies, you know, or avatar bodies. They have to have that essence of the creator of all, you know, the source of the ultimate God, whatever you want to call him. And so perhaps, you know, Marduk was building an army up, and his whole idea was to bring his human soldiers, you know, his armies, because he had vast armies he built. He raised a lot of them in Egypt, you know, when he was Ra, you know, and he was also known as Baal. But he, you know, maybe he figured if he built one of these stargates, he could bring his army to the next dimension, you know. So I don't know. It's interesting. You know, if you look at it the way Zachariah Sitchin and some of the um, ancient astronaut people explain it, it was a spaceport, and that was the danger, was that he could launch his own spaceships, you know, his own vimanas, you know, like they talk about in the Vedas, the Hindu Vedas, you know, to war with Yahweh and Ninurta and his family. So
It does make more sense than, oh, we just built a monolithic structure. We're gonna walk up and get to God, but God got mad about it and destroyed it. That doesn't, I mean, it really doesn't make sense. Like, you know.
yeah,
Something you touched on earlier, talking about the people being scattered across the earth and their languages. They had come up with new languages. Um, they they got scattered and got new language, but they still had similar ideas, and maybe that's how pyramids popped up is all over the world. And like the commonalities between cultures, dragons, pyramids, what have you, is they still had those concepts and those ideas, but they communicated differently afterward.
yeah,
So that might
yeah.
have,
I mean, there had to be a worldwide connection. Yeah.
yeah,
Definitely feels like there's more to the story. How does that relate to modern day times?
Well, you know, we've spoken about before about, you know, the Gulf War, how, you know, when we, you know, went in to take care of Saddam, you know, to save the oil, you know, and the Kuwaitis, um, you know, one of the first things our military did was they rushed right to all of the major museums. In fact, the Museum of Baghdad, in Iraq, and surrounded those museums. And they claimed it was to protect them from the warfare, from shelling and all that, and keep Saddam's troops from using those as like, kind of safe places, to hide so that they wouldn't bomb them and all that, you know. And but the funny thing was, a lot of those antiquities were stolen, were whisked away by the U.S. military. And of course, there's been insiders that troops that were stationed at these museums and stuff that said they were looking for ancient technology that tied back to biblical times, that that Saddam was bragging about. He was calling himself the new Nebuchadnezzar, and he was rebuilding Babylon, and that he'd found ancient stargates and ancient technology, from the ancient Sumerians and Akkadians and Babylonians, and so I think it all kind of ties together. I mean, if there was a Stargate being built at the Tower of Babel, it's more than likely they were being built elsewhere. In fact, when I mentioned Baalbek earlier, being a lot of people talk about the fact that the reason why those stones were so big was that it was some kind of a spaceship platform or some kind of a launch platform or something that could take intense heat and intense explosions, and it could stand up to it. Because I mean, those blocks there, I mean, they're just insanely large. I mean, just huge limestone blocks that are thousands of tons. I mean, I don't think people can wrap their minds about how big these were. I mean, if you ever see pictures of people standing on them, they look like ants standing on these blocks.
Yeah, they're big.
And when you look at Baalbek, of course, the Romans built their own temple on top of that platform. But the question is, what was that platform truly built for? And definitely, how did they do it? There's just no way.
Yeah, we've
We
got some
could never replicate it.
spaceport tarmac here. Let's build a temple. They're not using the spaceport anymore.
Well, we're
You
just
know,
take it at face value because that's what we've been taught.
you know,
But I think people are breaking out of that mindset now.
I always feel when I'm looking at any kind of ancient artifacts, structures, etc., there's so much more to the story than what you're seeing in the images and what's being explained. That you could spend a lifetime on one object and just continue to find things about it that were never known before, or well, have been forgotten. It's more complex. I mean, just look at some of the stuff artifacts from our own lifetimes and the various technological items. There's a lot to those, a lot of complexity to them that gets lost over time. It's like, oh, it's just a CD player. That's a complicated device.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
and stuff like that. It's like that. All of that technology gets lost because it just people forget how to make it, how to work it, and it just goes into the dump, so to speak.
Or some people just kept the blueprints for
Well,
themselves.
there's that too. I'll patent this later when they forget that it was patented.
Well, it's interesting, and I'm not saying anything bad about, but and I'm talking about the top level, not just your regular, local, lodge, your cops and your firemen and doctors or whatever that are members of that lodge. I mean, the top levels, they're protecting a lot of that ancient mystery school information, and a lot of that goes back to those ancient building techniques. I mean, what did they have? Did they have devices that they could maybe with sound? That's one theory, that they had some kind of way with sound resonance that they could lift, like levitate, like blocks and stuff. I know a lot of people talk about when I post a lot about the Incan, which really wasn't the Incans, it was the previous civilizations to the Incans. But how they'd built all those, I mean, you're talking about perfectly megalithic stones that have some of them have like 8 or 9, angles on them, perfectly wedged together with not, you can't even stick a pin through those cracks, you know? And some people say, well, maybe they had a way they could melt rock, and form it, almost like we do with metal, and plastic and stuff. So, I mean, that, those are some plausible ideas, but those were definitely highly advanced techniques, regardless, that we don't know how to replicate.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So they were able to melt stone. Well, how did they do that? How did they?
Exactly. Exactly.
I
You
definitely,
know,
there's more to the sound. I kind of had a download the other day about sound and concerts. Allie just went to a festival. I was thinking about how sound waves affect the body just in that. And when you're talking about sound waves affecting the body, what frequency are they putting in you when you're at a concert, or what kind of music you're listening to? I'm just wondering what kind of frequency they're putting out there for us, and versus what the healing. I told Joe we should get a mega speaker and put some headphones on to block the sound, and then let the music pulsate through at like a healing solfeggio tone or something like that.
oh yeah. Yeah, what I can't remember the exact frequency, but the US government, and I think most world governments, they tune all of our music, to a certain frequency. And it actually when they do like, studies on it, with like, how you can run it through sand or water and different like mediums, and it creates like shapes, and well, the frequency that our music is recorded under with our, our music industry and through our TVs and all that, it's very disjointed. It's almost like it purposely throws our bodies and our minds out of balance, and if you just tweak some of those frequencies to like, you know, all of a sudden you get these amazing geometric shapes, and like it's very like harmonic to the body and to the environment. I mean, you can't tell me that's not on purpose.
I might be wrong, but before they started doing that, it was all tuned um, I think it was tuned to the solfeggio frequency, but it was one that was harmonious. It wasn't a discordant frequency. And now, I mean, we wondered before we realized that what was going on, because music we normally like on the radio, you'd listen to even just mellow music, and it just agitate and irritate you. Your fuse would just get really short.
Have you guys experienced that with the radio at all?
Oh yeah.
I'm actually addicted to music. So I have to admit that I'm actually planning on turning off my phone, which means turning off my Spotify. But I can just like think and listen to music forever. And it's not necessarily, it puts me at a higher frequency. I mean, not higher frequency like angelic wise, but more of like, anxiety, I guess anxiety. But I've been like that my whole life, where I kind of feed off. I'm actually talking dysfunctionally, sorry, but yeah.
I mean, I love music too. I love all different kinds of music, but it's definitely obvious that in the music industry, just like in the movie industry, they're playing games with us. It seems like we're being attacked on all fronts. Through the media, through education, through music, through our food, through the air, through the water. I mean, it's like our medicine's poison. I mean, it just, I mean, if people can't like kind of pull themselves out and look in and see that like there's some really bad wrong, something's very wrong with our environment, and how it seems like it just keeps getting worse and worse. I mean, you look at our food, our food's not even real anymore. I mean, if you're buying any like kind of processed foods or uh drinks or anything, just look at the ingredients. I mean, it's all GMO, it's all GMOs, it's all artificial ingredients, flavors, preservatives. I mean, on and on and on. I mean, there's hardly any real ingredients in any of that.
I got a new app I'm gonna promote. It's called Yucca. It's YUKA. And you can just take your barcode and scan your product, and it will tell you if there's like poisoned additives, and it will give it a rating scale. So it's really cool. I don't make any money off of it or
No,
anything,
we're not paid to promote it. We just like it.
yeah, I think it's really great because, when you're looking at your salad dressings and you think you have a healthy one, you scan it and you get a low score. Well, just move on to the next one. We were just talking about that. Like, we're going to have to really just get down to basics and use whole food products going forward, because you can't trust anything anymore. Make it
Yeah.
off scratch.
It scores things on a scale of 0 to 100. 100 being
Good.
reasonably safe to eat. And it's fun to go down like the snack aisle or the cereal aisle and scan the barcodes and try and find something that's better than a 5.
Yeah, good luck.
Very few.
Yeah,
I'll
that's
I was at the gas station today just because I wanted snacks, because I'm actually traveling right now. And I typically always go to the health food store, especially when I lived in Portland, it was more accessible. But, I did grab a couple of things that were like pretty gross that I never would normally eat. But that whole aisle, I could just energetically feel, like you were saying, the GMOs, the preservatives, even like the packaging and the marketing. I mean, it's just like, it's in your face. Like, once in a while, I will I'm going to be honest, poison myself, just because. I guess that sounds horrible, just because I sound really dysfunctional. I listen to music and get anxiety and eat poisonous food from time to time. But hey, I'm being honest.
We all do.
But yeah, it's pretty, it's gross. Okay. That's it.
And we're all guilty of it. But
Yeah.
that app is really cool because it will give you an alternative. Don't eat that,
That's
eat
cool.
this. Yeah.
I'll look it up. Yucca.
Yeah.
Yucca.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really cool. So what do you guys think's gonna come up for the rest of the year? What do you think we're looking at for the next couple months? Any tea you want to spill or information you might have?
Geez, it sure ain't looking good, that's for sure. I do believe that there are, some good factions out there, that, you know, this world's a dualistic world we live in. Everything, think about it, even all the way down to just the matrix detail, like the computation of this world is, ones and zeros, negative, positive, feminine, masculine, light and dark, positive, negative, evil, good. So there's factions trying to destroy us or at least enslave us, and there's factions that are trying to free us too. And I don't want to say things are going to get worse, but they could get worse. But I do believe we're going through like some kind of a transition, like the birth pangs, like in Revelation, it talks about like right towards the end, that, there's all these the birth pangs, that the earth feels it. We feel it spiritually, and it just feels like the systems are crumbling right now. Everything's falling apart, the dollar's crashing, world economy's crashing. Of course, these people are purposely perpetrating that because their idea is that they're going to bring in their world government. They want to bring in their world totalitarian system. These people are clowns, but they're scary clowns because they've got the money and power to try to carry out the aims that they're doing. And however, that being said, I do believe there are good factions, not just maybe in the physical realm here, but in the spiritual realm that are, that it's like a chess game. They're going to have counter moves, and they're I think they're trying to set us up for this, golden age, that the Hindus talk about, that in Revelation it talks about, after all of the, all the crazy stuff happens. So I don't know. I mean, if I don't think we should be afraid though, because when you really break it down, we're almost like spacemen ourselves. We're almost like aliens ourselves, because we're truly energetic, conscious energy, spirits, and we live on multiple dimensions, into multiple dimensions, and we're this body, this avatar, this human flesh that we take on. It's like the spacesuit that allows us to immerse ourselves in this world, in this matrix, in this reality, and they can do whatever they want to these bodies and all this, but they can't harm our souls, our spirits. And I think that's what infuriates them, so they try to enslave us and control us. The sad part is most of our brothers and sisters here on earth don't realize that, we're creator beings ourselves, that we're powerful beings, that we can create a utopia here, true utopia, golden age, if we could all just band together and overthrow these people,
Look,
but
look around.
that's the problem. That's why they got to control us,
Yeah, if we just take a look around. I mean, all the stuff that is made by humans, we created, good or bad. It's just up to everybody to decide, if you're going to make something good or bad.
I heard that the electricity was gonna go up like double. So whatever you're paying now, expect to pay double around December. And the other thing I heard was they're not gonna be restocking for Christmas. And I don't know if you've noticed, but they're doing all their sales early, like right now. It's not even Halloween yet, guys.
And I feel like some of it is just to grab more dollars. It's like, oh, we have a great sale.
Or there isn't gonna be any to grab because we're all gonna be paying our electricity bills and our gas bills.
Yeah.
And they know.
Silver linings or dark linings.
I'm just saying heads up 7-Up on that one, guys.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, food, gas is going to go back up. It's funny because I just read today how Biden was over there in Saudi Arabia, begging the prince there to, to on of course on OPEC's behalf, to hold off one more month before they before they start lowering production again, which is going to make our gas skyrocket again, which it already is sky high. But, we had that dip, of course, a lot of that's with elections and all that, but I just, that's going to go, gas is probably going to double again here in the next 2 or 3 months.
So gas and electric, why is electric doubling? Anybody got an idea for that one?
I know in Europe, it's already in Europe. They're paying like, I had one person on my page like message me, and he said that I think they were paying like 95% higher than they were a year ago, like pretty much double. And they're looking at it being triple or quadruple eventually by winter, because with the whole thing going on with Ukraine and Russia, and with the pipelines being blown up, and and at the same time they're pushing this green agenda too. It's like shut down all the power plants, shut down the nuclear power plants, the coal plants, the oil plants, and everything. And while they're this whole thing's going on, and Russia's cutting off natural gas. I mean, you can see these people are purposely doing this. I mean, people got to wake up. This isn't like some joke, like, oh yeah, they're trying their best, they're trying to save the planet. No, these people are trying to destroy civilization. It's obvious.
Drastically alter it for sure.
Seems like it.
Yeah, because
we bought some electric bikes.
Yeah.
We're ready
They're
for the
fun.
gas price increase. I'm like, I'm doing my part and not driving.
I do all the driving.
No, we're not gonna drive. We're gonna use our electric bikes that we can pedal as well. So that's our plan right now. When they did it a few years ago, I remember the gas price got ridiculous. And we just started walking everywhere because we had a grocery store nearby and we could just walk over there. And so, I mean, just do our parts to push back, I would say. Wherever you can walk when the gas prices get high, or buy an electric bike, or
Yeah.
I might have to get one of those pedal electric generators and I'll get in shape and power our dishwasher.
That
the
reminds me
thing
of an
that's
episode
so
of Black Mirror when they were pedaling
Oh, yeah.
for energy and points, you know. So I think they have that covered in the future too.
Oh yeah. Well, it's so infuriating about all that. When we lived in Colorado, my wife and I both grew up in northern Colorado, and up there, a lot before we moved, I had a lot of friends in the oil fields up there, that worked up there, and they were telling me that, I mean, they discovered oil. I mean, you're talking, you know, hundreds of billions of barrels. I mean, just ridiculous amounts, of oil. I mean, you're talking like oil that would rival the best oil fields in Saudi Arabia in just Colorado. That's not including Alaska, Texas, all these other, North Dakota, Wyoming, all these other rich oil states, they're not tapping it on purpose, and that's what's so infuriating about that. It's like, we don't need, OPEC oil. We don't need solar panels and all this. I mean, there are better ways to do energy. I mean, DARPA has got the technologies locked up from the public that, there's they have was it cold fusion? They have all kinds of different ways that we can generate like massive amounts of power without having to use nuclear, without having a million solar panels built in China put up everywhere, without all these solar, or the
Turbine.
wind turbines everywhere, without even having to use the oil or natural gas. And we're literally watching the breakdown of our whole society, and we're watching these factions battle it out in front of us right now. For those of us that can see, yes, a lot of the population, they're totally asleep. They have no clue what's going on around them. They're just, complaining because prices are going up. They don't understand that this is a metaphysical battle going on, that this is a spiritual battle going on, and it's being manifested in the third dimension in this reality. So right in front of them.
And
Well said, Bob. I loved how you put that. That was really good.
Yeah.
And so I just piggyback off what he said, except I'll say like have acceptance with what's happening, and that's where I'm at personally. And not just not just, without taking action, but just without the fear component. So I have camping gear that I can use if I go camping, or if it's, food shortages. And yeah, so it is there is a spiritual war going on, and it's interesting how the third dimension is kind of where a lot of this is being played out. And yeah,
I would say everybody just turn your TV off. Kill your TV.
Yeah.
And have a little bit of supplies just for comfort's sake, and don't live in fear.
Keep the faith.
Yeah.
Large societies and large civilizations have come and gone, yet here we are. I think we'll be here for some time yet, one way or another.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys. We'll be talking to you real soon, and I really appreciate you coming on and talking about the Tower of Babel and, kind of the happenings that's going on today. It was a really interesting conversation. I know that we all like to go down that rabbit hole.
Wink, wink.
Jump in and out of the matrix.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Allie. Thank you, Bob. It was great
Thank
talking to you
you.
tonight.
Thanks.
Bye,
See you guys.
guys.